Welcome back to our Negroni Week mini-series, where I'm sharing with you some of my absolute favourite Negroni riffs, including this one, which I'm very, very excited about. So, although we will be making a drink in this video, this is more about a technique, which I don't think is on the internet anywhere, at least I couldn't find it, and you don't often see this technique being used. So I've given this a very innovative name. This is called cold brew coffee cocktails, and it kind of does what it says in the tin. We're going to be cold brewing the entire cocktail today with coffee, and we're going to be applying this to a drink called an Old Pal. So cold brew Old Pal. I'm calling this a cold pal, but you can apply this to any Negroni riff or even any stirred cocktail. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. Cold brew coffee cocktails. What are we doing here? Essentially, we're cold brewing the entire cocktail with coffee. So whereas classic cold brew, you just introduce coffee to water, leave that in the fridge until the coffee flavor extracts into the cold water, we're going to apply the exact same technique to an entire cocktail. So the cocktail we're going to be cold brewing today is called an Old Pal. And if you're familiar with a Negroni, you'll know it's equal parts of gin, Campari, and sweet vermouth. One riff on this created by Harry McElhone of Harry's Bar in Paris is called a Boulevardier. And this is a really delicious drink. We sub out the gin, bring in whiskey, usually bourbon whiskey, and that's called a Boulevardier. And broadly speaking, this has increased from a 1:1:1 ratio of each ingredient to 2 parts whiskey to 1 part Campari and vermouth. And this ends up being a little bit more of a spirit-forward drink, a little bit kind of richer, less botanical than the Negroni, with that kind of depth you get from the whiskey. So the Old Pal, also created by Harry around the same time in the 1920s, is close to a Boulevardier, but also quite different, and it really drinks differently. So the first switch is subbing out bourbon, bringing in rye whiskey, which has got a little bit more spice generally speaking. And then the second change, which is actually quite a big one, is switching out sweet vermouth and bringing in a dry vermouth, which really kind of lightens the drink, adds a little bit of florality I find in the end result, and just gives a little different perspective on that. So this drink on its own, fantastic. 2 parts of your rye whiskey, 1 part Campari, 1 part dry vermouth, stirred down over ice and then served in a frozen coupe glass, garnished with lemon zest rather than orange. It is a really delicious riff on the Negroni, but it's crying out for that delicious coffee flavor, which we're going to introduce today. So when choosing a coffee, it's quite important to choose a coffee which complements those kind of floral notes, the bittersweet notes in the Campari, but also the richness in the whiskey. And I've found the perfect coffee for this. It's a honey processed Gasha variety from my friends at Blossom Coffee Roasters. And it's got those really nice high-end florals, a little bit of a tea-like characteristic, but also those caramel notes which really work with the whiskey. But when you're choosing a coffee, pick one that has those kind of citric notes, some kind of depth in there as well. Maybe a washed Ethiopian coffee would work really nicely. Some kind of clean Colombian coffees would be really good. But whichever coffee you choose will impact the flavor of the drink. So choose carefully, choose in line with the flavors you're going to find in the Old Pal, or whichever drink you're introducing this to, and you'll get great results. Even if you just want to introduce the flavor of coffee without making it a caffeinated cold brew coffee cocktail, also fine. There are some amazing decafs on the market. Again, just choose one that has the flavor profile that you want to introduce to your cocktails. Caffeine is not necessary, completely optional. So for our Old Pal, it's really simple to put together. 2 parts of rye whiskey, I went 200 grams. 1 part of Campari, I went with 100 grams. And then 1 part again, or 100 grams of a dry vermouth, or I'm actually using an aromatized wine, strictly speaking, which is Cocky Americano. But as with all these recipes, try different dry vermouths. They'll have a different kind of impact on the drink. Try different coffees, try different whiskeys, and you can experiment to your heart's content. So to make our Old Pal into a cold pal, and make it into a cold brew coffee cocktail, it's really, really simple. This template works with pretty much any stirred drink. So take your beverage weight. So in our case, 200, add 100, add 100, 400 grams. And then I add 5% of that in ground coffee. So 400 grams, 5% of that is 20 grams of coffee, ground to a kind of medium grind size, not as coarse as you would for a cafetiere, not as fine as you would for espresso. Introduce that to the jar, seal it up, give it a good mix together, and then leave that to cold brew in the fridge for around about 12 hours. After that time, it'll have taken on some of the really delicious coffee notes, pass it through a paper filter, something like a V60, bottle it up, and you've got this amazing coffee cocktail ready to go whenever you want to drink it. And then to finish off your Cold Pal, or whatever stirred cocktail you're making, just add between probably 60 and 100 mils of your liquid into a glass, depending on the glass size that you're serving this in. And we're just going to stir this down with plenty of ice just to give it that dilution and get it really nice and cold. Strain that into your favorite frozen coupe glass. And then to finish it off, really important part of the drink is going to be the garnish. which is going to be our lemon zest. So I take a big swathe of lemon peel, I'm going to express that over the drink. Pop that on the side, and there you have the cold pal. So super simple, really, really convenient, and let's give it a try. It's so refined. The coffee flavor is really, really obvious. That 5% works really well for me. If you want to add more coffee flavor, obviously increase that. If you want less coffee, you can decrease it, but maybe just shorten the time that you're cold brewing it for, just so it doesn't over extract. But it just kind of all ties together really nicely. The end flavor of the drink really is kind of like spiced, citrusy, kind of floral coffee. You've got the bittersweet notes coming from the Campari, the spice coming from the rye, the kind of clarity and elegance from the dry vermouth or the aromatized wine. But critically, this isn't about the old pal or the cold pal specifically. It's all about that technique which we've used, which is the cold brew coffee cocktail. So let me know below in the comments which drink you think this would work really nicely with. Whatever your favorite stirred cocktail with, this is gonna be great. You could do a Manhattan, which I'd really recommend, an iconic drink. You could try it with a Martinez, which is a massively underrated drink. And if you don't already know it, you definitely need to. Whatever you want, give it a try, let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.